Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us in this special add-on session for our esteemed IMG applicant colleagues. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Nick Heitkamp. I'm part of the Future Peds Res account, who is one portion of the group putting on this event this evening.
And my name is Makela Neal-Canton. I'm another part of the Future Peds Res account, and so happy to be here with you all tonight.
One other person we'd like to mention who was not able to join us is another member of Future Peds Res who's specifically working on our IMG Equity Initiative. And a lot of the questions and communication with our fellow IMG colleagues has been started by Delara.
Thank you, Delara. As always, we would love to thank Dr. John Frona, our APPD father figure, best friend, BFF, everything, for helping us throughout this entire webinar series. Dr. Frona, if you wanted to say a couple of words.
Sure, thanks. I seem like I'm growing titles, but they're all positive ones. That's good. I just want to, again, welcome people tonight. Nick and Makela have really put on a nice series of webinars that hopefully some of you guys have actually been able to join with us before. And if you haven't, the videos are all available. So we're really happy that you're here. And as a member of the APPD board, I'm really happy that we've been able to provide this level of support this year, especially given the unusual nature of the times that we're in. So thanks.
Wonderful. And we also have Dr. Blankenberg, the president of APPD, on the call with us tonight.
Good evening, everyone. It's really nice to see you here. I'm so appreciative to Future Peds Res and all the work that Nick, Makela, and Delara have done in putting this together. They have really served as an incredible advocates and voices for all of you. I'm also hugely thankful to the great panel that you're about to meet, and John Frona, who's been a huge part of hosting all of these. I just wanted to say that as president of APPD, I think I speak on behalf of all of our program directors with how much we value all of you. We really value international medical graduates. You make up a huge part. 35% of our residency positions in pediatrics are made up of IMGs. And even more importantly, you have brought so many unique perspectives to our programs and taught us so much about caring for children and advocating for children. And so with that, we have put together this panel for you tonight, and we really hope to answer any questions that you have. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. As always, we wanted to quickly mention our series goals for the entire #PedsMatch21 webinar series, essentially just to bring together Peds applicants and programs during this crazy virtual season.
Awesome. So here's our schedule lineup briefly. So we're in our introductions now. Dr. Blankenberg will cover general guidelines and resources. The second portion is that we have some phenomenal panelists that have prepared some frequently asked questions and answers to those questions. And then we'll end the latter half with live Q&A, and we'll tell you about how to participate in that here in 1 second. So the first part of this two-part engagement is that, as always, you can interact with us on Twitter. If you go to twitter.com and in the search bar, put in our unique hashtag FPR webinar that you see in your bottom left-hand corner, and then click the button latest. You'll see any questions, and there are already questions as I'm looking at them regarding this specific webinar, and we will bring those up during the question and answer at the end.
And on the Zoom side of things, this being a webinar, you can utilize the Q&A box, and Nick and I will be monitoring that to bring up any questions that you have through Zoom.
Wonderful. And with that, I would like to turn it back over to Dr. Blankenberg.
Great, thank you so much. So we wanted to share some general resources with you that can be helpful this and all interview seasons. These resources come from the NRMP, the AAMC, AMA, and many others, very much including ECFMG and FAMR, and then the AAP. And I'll go through each of these resources. So as you know, the NRMP each year puts out a great document called the match, and it goes through the outcomes from the prior year's match that can really help guide you in terms of knowing how many people in a particular discipline or a particular area come from different medical school backgrounds. Next slide. And these are a number of the table of contents of everything from average scores for different programs and number of programs that people have applied to. Next slide. And as you can see, this data is broken down into the number of US international medical graduates, and there is data for non-US medical international medical graduates, both matched and non-matched, so you can get a better sense of how you compare to others who are applying for pediatrics. Next slide. In addition, the AAMC has a number of resources, and they have a great program called Apply Smart for Residency, which helps guide applicants knowing how many programs to apply to and what sort of criteria program directors are taking into account as they're choosing applicants to come to interview. Next slide. The AMA recently put out a great video conference on October 1st that really talks about how COVID has changed the residency application process this year. In addition, I would highlight the sessions that Future Peds Res and the APPD and COMCEP have put out around pediatrics residency application processes. Next slide. So we want to share with you about the NRMP, what you need for the NRMP match this year. As you know, the deadline for these documents is March 3rd, 2021, and either USMLE Step 1 and Step 2 CK and a Step 2 CS from prior years, or you can use the ECFMG certification pathway for 2021, which includes the Step 1, USMLE Step 1, Step 2 CK, and then using the occupational English test as a way of being able to make up for not having a Step 2 CS exam. And that needs to be done by December 31st, 2020. Next slide. And so we wanted to really highlight that the ECFMG has wonderful resources on their website, and they've spelled out, I think, all of the different contingency plans to really think through how do you have all the right tests and documentation in order to apply this season. And so for those who have not passed the Step 2 CS, there are other ways that you can get your ECFMG certification. Next slide. And these include these different pathways, which are really nicely highlighted here on this slide and on their website. And you can look through each of the pathways, goes through prior, the medical training that you've had and the types of tests that you may have taken that can be exceptions to doing the Step 2 CS exam, knowing that that wasn't available for most of the season. Next slide. And then to let you know that there are a number of frequently asked questions that are also found on the website, which are extremely helpful. And last, there have been a lot of questions about the occupational English test. So again, that's required for all IMGs, regardless of citizenship or native language or language of instruction. And if you don't have the Step 2 CS, the deadline for that is December 31st, 2020. And this gives you more information about that test. And then we also wanted to share that there is a lot of support through the ECFMG FAMR services for IMGs, including support services and how to apply for visas, which can be found on this slide. And we'll be talking a lot more about visas a little bit later in the presentation tonight. And as you probably know, J1s and H1B visas are used for US graduate medical education. And we've been seeing a increase in the J1 visas for GME over the last decade. ECFMG is the only sponsor of a J1 visa for graduate medical education. And there's no limit on the number of J1 visas. So we will be talking through a lot more about the visa process in a little bit. Next slide. Finally, we really care about your mentorship and support, both in this application process and when you start residency. And so we wanted to share a few resources with you. There's a wonderful committee through the AAP, which is the section on international medical graduates. They've actually been instrumental meeting with our residency program directors and fellowship directors to help them better understand your needs when you start residency and fellowship. In addition, they have a lot of resources for you as the applicants and as residents and fellows within our programs. In addition, there was a wonderful paper that came out from Dr. Katz et al., really talking about an acculturation toolkit and just basically an introduction or orientation for IMGs transitioning to the United States medical system. And it's a wonderful toolkit that they put together. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blankenberg. And to all of our audience, we will plan to release these slides as well so that you can see all of the information that was just talked about. So we'll move on next into our frequently asked questions section. So I wanted to introduce our panelists. If you wanted to say something about yourself as I introduce you. So we have Dr. Louis Crada.
Hi, I'm the program director at Brooklyn Hospital Center in Brooklyn, obviously. I am an American graduate, but I've been working with international medical graduates for most of my post-graduation or most of my post-residency and fellowship years. I'm very excited to be part of this panel, and I'm looking forward to answering some of your questions as we come up.
Wonderful. And next we have Dr. Aisha Mirza. I think you're muted.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. So I am actually, it says APD, but I'm actually the program director at the University of Florida in Jacksonville. I'm also, I was a former IMG applicant many years ago, and through my own experiences, and then as a program director, we take IMGs in our program. So hopefully all these experiences will help me answer some of your questions. And I also wanted to mention that I'm actually also an executive committee member for the AAP Committee on Foreign Medical Graduates. That's one of the resources Dr. Blankenberg showed. And definitely you can also reach out to us in terms of any questions that you may have, or any guidance that you may need, especially if there are people who come from your medical schools. I think they can be a big resource for you.
Wonderful. And next we have Dr. Sybil Pencil.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here on this webinar. I'm a program director at the Children's Hospital at Sinai in Baltimore, Maryland, and I've had some experience working with IMGs and really helping them be successful and match into fellowship and do really amazing things. So I'm looking forward to working with you today. Thank you.
Wonderful. And last but not least, we have Dr. Jocelyn Salvador, who also has some great information coming your way about visas.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be part of this. We are very happy to support you. I'm an associate program director for the pediatric residency program at Bronx Care Hospital Center in the Bronx in New York. I myself also am an IMG, and I've gone through residency and fellowship on visa status and in another visa status as an attending. And so hopefully we'll be able to use our experience to answer your questions.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, panelists. With that, we'll jump into our first question. And the first question is this. So how many programs should IMG students apply to this cycle? And then similarly, does the APPD recommendation of 15 programs apply to IMG?
So I guess I'm going to jump in and try to answer that question for you guys. And I wish I had a magic ball that could tell you all these answers, but unfortunately there is no magic ball for this. I know that it is very different being an American graduate and looking at all the statistics, because all the statistics really deal with American graduates, and there are really no great statistics for the international medical graduates. Having polled both American international medical graduates, Caribbean medical graduates, and international medical graduates, the number that I'm receiving is that most people, say to about 100 programs is what you should apply to. I have to say that probably, I would not change dramatically this year from what you applied from previous years. I would not increase that number at all. I know that the APPD is recommended a little bit less for the American grads, and I think it is a little bit different. But, in terms of applying to 80 versus 100, I'm not sure what that number would really mean in terms of reducing it by 20%. I think you have to apply smartly, and that's going to be the most important thing. When you do read anything about this, it's all about your scores. It's about the years after graduation that you are. It's about your MSPEs. It is about your visa status as well. And I think all of those things do have to come into play when you're making that decision, that, if you have very high scores, and this is the last year that we will see step 1 scores. I guess next year we're going to go to pass fail for step 1. So that is really what's quoted the most online as to the most predictive value for getting interviews. And that is going to change dramatically next year. But at this point in time, if you did very well in your step 1, then you probably don't need to apply to as many programs. Obviously, if you did well in your CK, then you don't either. The CS is not required this year. That there is going to be the other test of English's OE. Sorry, but I forgot the letters already. There's so many letters that are thrown at us all year long that I forgot the letters for this one. But that is going to be the replacement for the CS at this point in time. But that's still just pass fail. Again, if you are, the farther away you are from graduation, the more difficult it may be to get a spot, because you have to look at whether programs are really accepting applicants from 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, as well as whether you've done rotations in the United States. If you do have some letters here, and I know that people are going to speak about the letters also later on. So all those factors do come into play. I wish I could give you a calculation and say X times Y plus Z minus 3 divided by 15 would give you the number of applications, but there is no number. And I think you have to feel the most comfortable you are with that. Be realistic. And this is the advice I give to all the people that I do give. I write a lot of letters of recommendation. I write about 40 to 50 letters of recommendation every year. And I have to say that the bottom line is that all of your interviews, you need to be online. You need to be, I should say, happy. You need to really be on there. And if you feel as though you are sort of failing, and after a point of 20 to 25 interviews, it's difficult to keep up that smile. And I can see that Dr. Pencil is really smiling there. So I'm going to say, I'm sorry, I don't really know you, but I'm going to use your smile as that smile that I would say. If you can't maintain that kind of smile, then it's difficult to really interview after that point. And that you do feel burnout. And I know that I myself, even as an American graduate, I had a lot of interviews, and at the end of my interview trail, I cut off my numbers because I felt like my sincerity level had dropped to 50%. And I could not anymore describe why I wanted to be a pediatrician, why did I like kids, why did I want to go on with this, and it's really difficult. So again, it's a lot of different factors that go into this. So I'm going to stop here now.
Wonderful. So our next question to Dr. Mirza is, does step 3 matter? Is it required before October 21st?
So I would say here that step 3 is actually not required for entry into residency or to start your intern year. There are people who take step 3, specifically if you are applying for the H-1B visa, in that case, step 3 is required, but not for the regular J visa. And I would also tell international medical graduates that there aren't that many programs now that offer the H visa. There are some, but a lot of programs have gone away from that, and that is because the H visa is technically a work visa. It's not really a training visa. So our university used to offer H-1B or H-1 a few years ago, and they stopped doing that specifically for this reason. So, if that's something still that you want to be considered for, then yes, you need to take step 3. However, just for a regular J visa, step 3 is not required. Not to meet your certification for ECFMG or to enter residency. It seems there are some programs that might have their own program requirement in terms of step 3. However, that is not the case for the majority of programs.
Wonderful. Okay, moving on. And if I'm correct, it's still to you. The question is the OET exam required before the 21st deadline?
So I think this question has kind of been answered already, and it's not required before. Remember, October 31st is the deadline that basically we are able to review applications. It's not the final deadline. The deadline to take the OET exam is actually December 31st, 2020. So you still have until then. And one of the other questions that was posed was, it might be difficult for some people if centers are closed. So the ECFMG is actually making arrangements to have the OET exam that could be taken at home. I think more details will be forthcoming starting sometime around the middle of October. So be on the lookout for that. So you might be able to take if you can't go to a testing center for whatever reason in your home country, then you may be able to take it online.
Excellent. So question 4 to Dr. Pencil is, how are international letters of recommendation viewed in an application?
Hi, thank you so much. So letters of recommendation can be tricky. They can be really useful, and sometimes they're not useful at all. And I don't think the issue is so much whether they're written by an international physician or someone in the US. It's more about the content of the letter. So you really want to be thoughtful about who you're asking to write these letters for you. Certainly, you want it to be someone who has worked with you, someone who can attest to your clinical strength. And it might be a bit uncomfortable to ask your attending or your consultant if they can write a strong letter for you. Maybe those words might be uncomfortable, but you can certainly ask if they think that you'd be a good physician, if you do well clinically, if you performed well, and if they can write a letter that would attest to those things. And I think that's what's most important. Certainly if it's someone who has experience with the US medical system and clinical work here, that's always a plus if they're familiar and can speak to that strength. But letters that talk about things like how nice you are or how punctual you are, that kind of information isn't particularly useful. So it's not so much where the letter is from, it's the content. So go for people who can talk about your strengths, who can really bring out meaningful clinical information, and emphasis on the clinical part, because that's what's really important. When I see letters that are from people who have worked in research, it's nice, but what I'm really looking for is clinical strength. So those are the kinds of things that I would pay attention to regarding your letters of recommendation. Thank you.
Awesome, super important. We really appreciate that. Okay, so our last question in this frequently asked questions session goes to Dr. Salvato, and the question is, are visa sponsorships given less frequently? I lost my screen. Are visa sponsorships given less frequency given the pandemic? Looks like we're having some brief technical difficulties. Dr. Salvato?
I think you may be muted.
There we go. Am I unmuted? Thank you. Sorry for cutting you off earlier there, Nick. But yes, that's the question. That is one of the trickier questions, and hopefully we can answer that here. As everyone probably knows by now, there are two types of visas that are out there for IMGs. One is the J1 visa, which is an exchange visitor visa sponsored only by ECFMG through the exchange visitor program. And the EVSP. The other one's the H1B, which is a specialty occupation visa that's sponsored by the institution in the residency program that accepts you. There are a few caveats to taking each visa. And I think that this is where a lot of consideration is going to be made in terms of just how easy, I don't think is a word, how smooth or not smooth the processing is going to be. In general, programs already decide beforehand whether they're going to be using mostly J1s, only J1s, if they're going to take H1Bs. And so one of the resources to be able to look into this is really look into FRIDA. If you go into FRIDA and also the program websites, most programs, almost all programs, will really be putting that into the information that they will be providing. In terms of the ease of creating or obtaining visas for applicants, for programs, it's much easier to use the J1 because ECFMG has done a tremendous job of not only processing this, but in the times of the pandemic, advocating for our incoming residents to be able to obtain their visas, not only just obtain their visas, but obtain them in a very timely manner. Whereas with H1B, it kind of has to still go through the processes. And fortunately, though, because we are within an occupation that has been deemed to be very essential, especially throughout this pandemic, we haven't really actually had that many obstacles as we had expected and anticipated in March. A lot of us were very much on edge as to how it would pan out. We are surprisingly seeing that things have actually been going on much smoother. I do want to, if I can move on to another slide, just provide some facts over 2009 and to see how, actually I'm gonna just do something a little different. I'm gonna stop the share. I'm gonna share something else. Let's use this. Great. I'm gonna be sharing the screen. There. And so in terms of resources that we can see that provide us information about just a proportion of what visas are actually being obtained by our medical graduates, Ms. Fitzpatrick from ECFMG has actually wonderfully given me a reference that we can all go to every year. The Journal of the American Medical Association actually releases a report around September every year to provide information on the percentage of visas being obtained by current medical graduate, current residency program acceptees. So if you see here, this is for this current year. So for this year where we have all the IMGs and combined programs, about 25% of all IMGs are actually on a J1, with about 6.5, of all residents are on J1s, with 6.5 being on H1Bs and other H visas, with IMGs totaling 26% of the entire population. As we had seen earlier, most are already getting J1s. In terms of pediatrics, about 10% of the J1s granted to physicians go into pediatric residents. And so it's fair to say that with the help of ECFMG, obtaining J1 visas is something of a assisted procedure. If you actually go to the EVSP website, you're going to be able to see a lot of really helpful information and tips on this. including a document checklist. I know that when I went through my visa processing, this was really essential for me to be able to get everything in line. They also have resources such as how to interpret different kinds of news items and whatever is happening currently, especially requirements for matching. And so they offer all of that information. To go back to answering the question, and if you guys want to share again, thank you. But in terms of the pandemic, we had already matched or gone through the matches or not matched by the time the pandemic had actually occurred. And so the reality of the situation is we already knew which visas people were getting. And so the benefit, like I had mentioned, is that because doctors and physicians are very essential, a lot really went into play with ECFMG, trying to make sure that we get our visas in place. And so how I would answer this question ultimately is, I don't know that there's a really big difference between the type of visa being given by programs with regards to the pandemic. But in terms of the selection of applicants, in terms of getting all of the stuff prepared, I think is where we're going to really look into it when we receive applicants. So for example, applicants who will be able to obtain all of the required information, all of the required documents by the time we are going to be able to get the match out are going to be the applicants who are going to be able to even obtain those visas. So all of these sponsorships, I think, are not going to change in terms of frequency, but in terms of their success, I think that we do have to take consideration all of those factors that come into play with the pandemic, particularly in light of what we don't quite know, which is what the winter will bring us. There might be some delays in processing come the end of winter, which will be March and April. And so I think that we should just kind of be mindful of that. But rest assured that we are doing our very best, I think, as all programs, accepting all applicants to assist and make sure that the applicants are given the absolute greatest amount of support to be able to obtain visas if you do need one, to be able to come in, because as everyone has already mentioned, applicants are very much, and all of the IMGs particularly, are a key component to our medical colleagues and us being able to get everything done really well. Thanks.
Wonderful, awesome. Well, this brings us to our next portion, which is the Q&A portion. At this time, I think Mikala might stop sharing her screen so she can also help moderate. But we would like to mention we have 17 amazing questions via the Zoom chat box and then 3 hanging out on Twitter. So at any point, you're welcome to still continue submitting your questions. But with that, I think I will start with the first question. And the question comes to us from Susan. Susan says, are applicants who apply via the ECFMG pathway with the OET at a disadvantage versus applicants who have Step 2 CS as a part of their application? And I will call on, and you're welcome to throw it to someone else as well, but I'll just start with Dr. Crotto. Dr. Crotto, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I personally don't think it's going to make a very big difference, because I think since the CS is a pass-fail exam, I know that there are clinical applications in the CS that are obviously not addressed by the OET, but we do this year have Step 1 scores and we have your CK scores. So I think that it's not going to really play against you in terms of whether you took the OET or the CS personally. I mean, I know that when I'm reviewing these applications, that's the way that I would look at it, is that I have enough other information there that I can answer that question as to whether they're equivalent or not.
All right. So we'll go on to the next question then. And I'll throw this one to Dr. Mirza. And so this comes from Logan. Regarding the MSPE, which includes my evaluations for my core clerkships, COVID postponed a few of my rotations, which I have now finished later than planned, and the preceptors for them have not had time to finish the evaluation. Therefore, it has been left off of my MSPE. Should I politely ask that my evaluation be expedited so that it is on my MSPE and with my ERS application on time?
If you mean, should you politely ask the people who are supposed to give you those recommendations? I would say yes. Definitely you should ask, because everybody understands there's a lot of anxiety out there, and you want to make sure that your application is complete so you don't feel like programs are not inviting you for that reason. I would also say to all the applicants that, we do understand what the quandary that everybody is in. We are going to be looking at, every piece of your application, in a holistic manner. So we're going to look at, I think this year more than anything, your personal statements will be important, right? Tell your story. Tell us why you are applying to a certain region, to a certain program. So that we have, even if some letters are missing, we have some information from your step one, your MSPE, your personal statement. So we will use whatever information we have to help make those decisions. And I think we are going to be much more, lenient is not really the right word, but I can't think of some better word right now, but we'll be looking at everything. And I don't think anybody's application is going to the wayside simply because they don't have all the letters from the rotations that they've done.
I just wanted to echo what Dr. Mirza said. If we're looking at your MSPE, then we can see everything, and we're not going to stop looking because one piece of information is not in your MSPE. So just again, we are aware of how tough a year this is, and we're looking at all the elements.
Wonderful, thank you. I think that, at least from an applicant's perspective, that's so profound that everybody is understanding, and they understand this process is difficult. So we appreciate that. Our next question, I will send this to Dr. Salvato if she can answer, feels comfortable. This comes from Twitter, from Sayeda on Twitter, and it says, should one apply to a program even if you don't meet one of their requirements, such as number of months of the USCE? Could you tell us what the USCE stands for?
Actually, that's, I actually don't know what the US.
The US clinical experience?
The clinical experience, got it. So, and the question is if programs have a minimum requirement of US clinical experience.
Yeah, but I think she's asking should you still apply even if you don't meet one of their IMG list of requirements, such as number of months completed on USCE?
Thank you for the question. So in terms of requirements of programs for accepting applicants, programs try to be as upfront with what each program would like to obtain from an applicant. Usually requirements are a guide to tell people these are the types of applicants who we probably will look at in terms of the applications that are reviewed. There are actually a large number of applications coming in every year, whether it's this year or the years before, and there has to be usually a way for us to be able to go through the applications in a fair manner. And to be fair, one of the things that programs do is to provide a list for applicants and say, these are the applicants whose applications or resumes or CVs we're going to look at. If you meet such, and so, then the likelihood of us actually getting to your file is probably 100%. We're going to review your application. Should you be able to apply? Sure, nothing stops an applicant from being able to provide an application. We have gone through applications beyond the ones that we've put in the criteria. There have been years where we actually review more applications than we had expected to the years before. And so we get to those applicants who may not have checked all those boxes that we had initially set out to get. So I hope that that kind of answers the question.
If I may, I just also like to add here that again, this is an unusual year. So, you know, I think most programs will be very willing to waive aside requirements that they would have in a normal year. And again, we'll use whatever information you can provide us, and knowing and understanding that you've done the best you could. Also depends, especially for international IMGs, what country they're coming from. There were countries that were closed for months and months. And so we do understand these things.
Yes, absolutely. Just to echo on that, if there is a requirement, most programs will actually take that down. So I would suggest to applicants, you know, go over it and actually see if that's something that's current or maybe not so current. I agree with Dr. Mirza, particularly our program, we really, and it's not just for IMGs and US clinical experience, it's just clinical experience in general. No one's been able to see actual physical patients between March, April, and probably May in terms of med students. Even the ability to do telemedicine has been limited, particularly for med students. So absolutely.
I think also, you know, I could say that from my program, what we do is we send out this, or I put out a net initially, and then after a month, I'll, you know, change my net and I will look at different things. I will accept, you know, certain graduation years, I'll accept certain scores. So, you know, keep us up to date as well. And I think it's really important. Somebody asked about, you know, again, changing your MSPE. It's always fine to send a single email to say, you know what, I got another letter of recommendation that I want to know that I want you to know is on my application. This part of my MSPE has been updated. You know, if you send us an email every day, then it becomes a little bit overbearing. But I think 1 or 2 emails just to let us know that, you know, you've completed something that we may have filtered you out because I'll go back and I'll say, you know what, now you've actually met all my requirements. I will.
Oops, I think you muted at the end there.
Sorry, I muted myself again. But
yeah, just
you know, just to really keep us up to date. But
oh, you did it again.
did it again. Sorry.
I know, this whole
My
Zoom thing
spacebar
is very
There's something
tricky.
wrong
Yeah.
with my cordless keyboard is not working well. I'm sorry.
No worries. I think we just missed the last 5 seconds or so of what you said.
So it's basically like what I said in the beginning is that, you know what, an email periodically or 1 or 2 emails to keep us updated about your application status is a good idea, because we will go back and look, at least I will go back and look and see when you tell me that there's something you've added to your application. Don't just tell me that to remind me about something you've done, but something new, because it may have actually filtered you into my application process.
Wonderful. And so the next question to Dr. Pencil, and then of course to the rest of the team as well. We've been getting a couple of questions coming in about consideration to IMG applicants who have already completed a previous residency. So is that viewed as an advantage to quote unquote fresh graduates as an applicant into pediatrics?
Well, it's a good thing. I wouldn't say it's something that everyone has to run out there and try to do before applying just because you're an IMG. So yes, it's nice when someone comes in with some experience, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to get the spot over someone who doesn't have that experience. Again, this is a very wholesome approach. So just having a year of fellowship doesn't automatically get you in. It's the whole application and everything that you're bringing to the table, all of your strengths as a resident.
I just want to add that I think unfortunately there are, and we're one of those programs, so I'm saying unfortunately for us, that do look at the year from graduation. We sort of have a, you know, there are places where they do, GME does require that you look at that. And I think, again, this goes back to the question of the number of programs that you apply to. you do have to look at what the requirements are for years from graduation when you're applying, because it does make a big difference in the end as well sometimes.
Wonderful, awesome. Okay, so we have a new question, and the question is, how can you tell if a program I'm applying to is IMG friendly, and how do I prioritize that? Anybody would like to start?
I think you can look at the websites. A lot of programs post on their websites who their residents are, who their former residents are, and what they've done after residency, and that includes their medical school information. So that's a good place to start, just to get a feel for the program.
Another probable hint is that either on the website or on FRIDA, that it already lists the types of fees accepted. So if it already says, you know, we accept H-1 visas or H-1B visas, it usually indicates that a program is, if not fully capable or fully very familiar with the process, at least aware about the process, and definitely willing to sponsor IMG.
Wonderful. So we have another question here. And this one says, with CS being canceled due to COVID-19, my ECFMG certification is going to be delayed. Are programs going to be forgiving in terms of requiring the ECFMG certification on application submission? To anybody.
I guess I can try to answer that. Oh, Dr. Mirza?
Question, Michaela?
Yes. So with CS being canceled because of COVID, my ECFMG certification is going to be delayed. Are programs going to be forgiving in terms of requiring the ECFMG certificate on application submission?
I would say the answer to that would be yes. Because again, we know that you have to take, if you weren't able to take the CS, you have to take the occupational English test. And then the deadline for that is December 31st. And again, some people may not be able to go and take it in person. So certainly, I think, again, there will definitely be more laxity this year, you know, and we'll definitely be more forgiving, sure.
Yeah, I could mention something here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Sally.
Yeah, so just to be reminded that many IMGs are not ECFMG certified when they apply to the residency. And there's certainly no deadline prior to the beginning of the process, which has been mentioned as a deadline. October 21st is really the opening of the application process for program directors. So the final certification requires all examinations, the final diploma and transcripts. So you may actually enter the match if you have all of the exam requirements. So that's what you need to enter the match. Certainly there may be programs that filter out applicants if they're not already certified, but historically that has not been the case. You do need the exams, which are either the historic Step 1, Step 2 CK, and Step 2 CS, or this year, the Step 1, Step 2 CK, approved pathway for certification, and the English language OET. The OET is required again by December 31, and you must have that pathway approved by the rank order list date of March the 3rd. So again, this gets into a lot of the recommendations of your program director so far, that you really need to be monitoring the ECFMG website and follow the instructions carefully and really track your dates. So good luck.
And if I may add, we honestly hate to lose anyone really good. So one of the things that we try to really be considerate about is life circumstance. And we are all right now experiencing a really tremendous life circumstance. And we always try to obtain the best you know, applications and an interview with a consideration of that. And we, in terms of being kind of looking at applications, we do consider whether or not you have, but programs are usually selecting applicants and putting applicants at the top of the list based on real qualifications. If the applicants don't get ECFMG certified, as Ellie had mentioned, they honestly won't get through the ranked list anyway in the match process. And so really it's to the benefit of the programs to be able to allow applicants to apply even if the certification isn't fully obtained by the time you're interviewed, even not just during the selection process. I do encourage people, you know, don't let it get you down. If you haven't been certified, if life has gotten in the way of you obtaining your CS or your certification, keep pushing through. We'll take your applications, we'll give you interviews, we'll provide you opportunities, because it really isn't over until it really is over. Many of our residents have really just, you know, gotten their certifications at the last minute. We're very happy that that happened, and well, you know, we just want to make sure that you guys don't lose hope. It's really worth it if you just persevere.
Wow, such an amazing point there about this whole process in general, the process of medicine in general, really. I think we might have time for one more question. And I'm going to kind of combine two questions because I think they're similar. So I'll pose this to the group, maybe if Dr. Pencil wants to begin. So the questions are STEP scores really the most important factor for an IMG to be invited for an interview? Is there a minimum score? And then a final question that was related to something said before is, what would you consider a high score in order to help me decide, you know, should I apply less programs?
Oh, wow. Nick threw me under the bus for the first punch on that one. Geez, thank you, Nick. That is a really tough question. And I think if we were to be honest, we will all admit that, yes, STEP scores are important when we're looking at applications and in that initial process. It also depends on the number of applications that a program receives. And this goes back to the issue of why we've been concerned about flooding programs with so many applications, because it becomes very difficult then to look at applications in a meaningful way. So yes, STEP scores are important. Now, as far as what number, that's a hard question, Nick. And I think every program is different and every program considers things differently, even for IMGs. There's some programs that are looking at what they might call top tier. There are other programs that are looking the middle ground. So it varies by program. It's very hard for me to put a number on that one. So is it important? Yes. Is it the ultimate and only thing that programs look at? No. What's a good score? Your best score. That's a good score. Your best number. I don't know if anyone else wants to put a number on it. I can tell you, I don't look at just greater than all the way up. I look in the middle ground. That's me personally. And I think it's important for you guys to hear that. I don't know if anyone else wants to throw specific numbers out there.
No, and I would just say that, you know, again, it's really hard to put a number. Sometimes we also look at the school, because especially anyone who has knowledge of international medical schools, you know, and you know what the reputation of the school is and the kind of graduates that they put out, even if your score is really, really average, but you came from that school, that might change the way somebody's going to look at your application. So I think, you know, for international medical graduates, quite honestly, there are just so many things to consider that probably, you know, we don't necessarily think about in terms of American graduates. So again, for my advice to people this year would be, you know, pay attention to your applications, select your programs carefully, think about, whatever information you can gather about the program from their websites, from people you may know, from alumni from that program, your programs who may have gone to different programs. So gather as much information, see how that program matches who you are. Don't just apply indiscriminately, because like for us, like I'd like to know why do you want to come to Florida? Like, so and be prepared to have some, answers that are plausible, really, instead of, well, you're just one of the 100 programs I'm applying to. So be mindful of the way you do your application, your personal statement. And at the end of the day, I think we are all in this together. So, just like all of you have concerns, so do we. We are also charting on, or we are also, this is uncharted territory for all of us. So, hopefully people are not going to be, well, we are all going to be anxious, but hopefully we all understand that everybody's anxious and it's going to be okay.
I think, unfortunately, when you get, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 applications, the only way that you could sort of look at things universally is by board scores. And I think a lot of us have a gray zone, and that, I think what Dr. Mirza and Dr. Pencil is also saying is that your personal statement plays a big role in that. I mean, as much as your letters of recommendation may say you're a great person, when I read a personal statement that says to me, this person loves pediatrics, and this person really wants to do pediatrics, I'll give you a little bit of extra credit, because I think that's really where I'm looking for also. I'm looking for that passion, and that passion comes from your personal statements. So really put work into your personal statements. I have to say that to me is almost as important as everything else. After I've done my filtering, when I read those personal statements and I think, wow, this person loves pediatrics, I really want to see that person. I want to meet them and I want to see what they're like, because it's nice to see people who love pediatrics. So
I just have to echo what you just said. When I read a statement, I want to meet this person. That's really what the statement is supposed to do, is to make me want to meet you.
And I think that whether programs go through the match or don't go through match, I think the word match is actually really appropriate in this case. It's really very interesting and amazing how this process matches residents and applicants to the programs. If you put your true self onto your application, the right program will find you. And it just usually turns out that way. The ones who don't quite have, a great experience with residency, maybe those whose applications don't always reflect truly what they want, what they see their future to be, what type of program they know that they'll kind of thrive in. But if you put your honest self forward, not just your best foot forward, it usually, if not almost always, will lead to the right kind of match.
Wonderful. And with that, we will conclude our webinar. I just wanted to say thank you so much to our panelists for taking the time to speak with all of us today, and to our audience. We really hope that this webinar brought some more comfort to you during this virtual season, and hopefully showed you how much support there is for all of us. We all truly are better together. I also wanted to mention that the future PedsRes team will plan to consolidate and post the unanswered questions, hopefully in a format that that can, maybe crowdsource some answers for you all. So stay tuned for that.
And as a parting statement, the theme is that there have been two themes tonight, is that apply smart, and we're all better because of one another. And so I wanted to mention the future PedsRes team has started an initiative called the Apply Smart campaign. And in fact, all it is doing is recognizing the need for all of us to think about one another when we're applying, and how many we're applying to and where we're applying to. And so if you'd like to learn more about this, we actually had a fellow IMG applicant, Nadia, submit a video this week on our account on Twitter explaining why she, as an IMG, is taking the pledge to apply smart. Everybody has their own circumstances, and so you need to consider yours, but what's so special about PEDS is everyone's also considering everyone's everyone.
Yes, I think Nick's internet may have cut out, but I would echo his statement. Oh, perfect.
A DIA webinar this Thursday, and then we have our very last regional webinar this Friday. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for hosting this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, everyone. Thank you.